Machines of the Working Class is the evolution of a movie that we had done in 2005 called Automated Assets. Now that film was done with computer-generated robots, and it had a very successful festival run. We were happy with it at the time that it was made, but a few years later it had sort of lost its charm for us. In 2008, Chris Shields was staying with us for the shooting of Who Stole the Electric Car, and at the time he was watching a bunch of our movies that he hadn't yet seen, and Automated Assets was one of them. So after he watched Automated Assets, he suggested what he felt would have been a better ending for it. And that was really when we made the decision to make another robot movie.
We grouped it with our other two short concepts that we had at the time, The Day the President Moved Thanksgiving and Keep Watching the Skies. Now, it wasn't until October of 2009 that we told Diego Kontorowski about the concept. At that time, Chris was back in Florida. We thought maybe indefinitely, so we just figured Diego and Alejandro could just write it instead. And then we were working, working background, me and Diego and Brett Bonham, which was also there, but he contributed nothing.
I called my brother, and I told him, start thinking of ideas for another robot dialogue movie, and he said, okay. And then I called him that night several hours later and asked him if he had thought of anything, and he said no. And I said, have you been, trying to think of stuff? And he's like, yeah, which means not really.
I vaguely recall getting some kind of phone call about needing an idea for a robot movie. I really think I just wanted to get off the phone very quickly.
So I told him, all right, you have 60 minutes to come up with an idea. I'm going to give you 1 hour. And he's like, okay. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to call you back at 9 o'clock, whatever it was. And then as I'm about to hang up, he goes, wait, what about two robots planning a heist? And then I wrote down a bunch of ideas while Brett and James were on set doing their business in the background of a TV show.
I may have read the script once. I don't really remember what I thought of it.
So for the next few months, Brett and Diego yelled at us to do the robots computer generated, but we didn't have any interest in doing that because that's exactly what we'd done 5 years earlier. The title that Diego had come up with was Machine Vision, which we didn't really like very much. In November, Diego and Carl were working on a video blog for the web series Rules of the League. And for that, Alejandro had come up with this working class gag.
This is Velveeta cheese, which in Italian means cheese of the working class.
We had planned on making Machines of the Working Class at the same time as Keep Watching the Skies, but we ended up waiting until Keep Watching the Skies was mostly done because we really needed to devote all of our resources and all of our energies on figuring out that ridiculous robot shit.
I went online and I found a website called societyofrobots.com. That was pretty helpful. I was able to read up a little bit from there. We built the bodies and the heads at the end of April of 2010. At the same time as we were building that, I had ordered all the servo stuff that we were going to need, all the remote controls and all that shit from a place called servocity.com. And it was supposed to be 2 to 3 days shipping. A few weeks pass, we eventually get the order. The battery pack has mysteriously disappeared from the order form. After another week, when that comes, I find out it's the wrong battery pack. It can't fit with anything else. I'm looking at these pictures on a website. I can't determine the scale. I don't know. I can't ask anybody. We ended up having to order the new battery pack again, and of course that was out of stock, and that took another week. So this whole horrendous ordeal, which should have been just 2 to 3 days shipping, ended up taking 6 weeks. And then all the shit finally comes together, and we're just scratching our heads figuring out how the hell are we going to get any of the weight to be distributed on the servos, because of course everything is smaller than I thought it would be. So now we're going to rip this whole thing apart because the scales don't match, and we're going to run a pipe through here. And then this thing just broke off minutes ago, but it doesn't matter because we're going to take it off anyway because it makes the whole head topple over. And then, of course, when we glue the arm on to robot number 2 on his side and we stand him upright, it just falls right off.
While we were waiting in May, we did record Chris and Diego's dialogue.
They could take us apart, melt us down into little pellets. I do not care. I don't even care, man.
Chris was still in Los Angeles after the shoot for Brett Bonowitz's The Comedian at the Friday feature film. The set was also constructed in miniature and shot at this time. It was mostly just printouts of dirty wall textures. After the terrible long process of building the robots, shooting them was relatively simple. We basically just woke up one morning in June 2010, and after we deemed the glue had dried enough, we just took the camera out and we shot them.
Yeah, and they can't try us in a court of law. We're man-made machines.
We did not shoot the close-ups separately. Everything came from the same setup. We had rotated the camera on its side so that we can get the most resolution possible per individual robot element. But then we still had to scale up the footage to 120% for the close-ups anyway. Now luckily, we had happened to recently build all these consoles for space lasers. which is a movie that may or may not ever get made, ever. So we just shot some of those to fill up the rest of the frame. And the last element was the crate, which was built out of popsicle sticks and features a lot of work that was never seen in the movie.
There was a lot of compositing work. Obviously the whole thing is green screen. Everything in the frame is a separate element. But aside from that, there was a lot of work that really should never have had to have been done. Robot number 2's light in his head, that had to be a composite. And then robot number 2's arm was crooked the entire time. But the most painful thing in this entire process was definitely the rods for the puppet arms of robot number 1. And there's really no good way to do something like that. We had done a lot of it a few months before on Sam Hale's Yama Song. You just gotta take elements of the previous frame and you just gotta cover it up with a bunch of colored blobs. But the setups were simple enough and this film was short enough that we were able to get through that work relatively quickly and with only a little bit more than the default amount of pain that we have to go through on a daily basis.